objectives as we move forward, and we work with our financial planning committee, our board of transportation, state budget, state treasurer is coming up with a spend plan that is going to kind of lighten that swing downward to kind of stabilize it a bit more. I did want to note this does reflect obviously our conventional construction projects, design build, our BikeWalkNC bond program that's based on our trust fund for the payback of that debt, U.S. discretionary grants, our grant anticipation revenue, GARVI bonds, that's based on our federal program, and then obviously the analytics from SAS. And this did also include the obligational authority that we obviously received last year. We do have a placeholder in here for spring issuance of BikeWalkNC and for some regional projects that are within our trust fund that are one of the advantages we've had is we've had a director of finance that Matt Lane over here was in, and he worked with our state transportation improvement program folks to really kind of plan the optimal times to do these sales. One of the top things on my radar and others this year has been budget authority, and in doing a better job really of covering project cost throughout the year. There was a heavy reliance on CFO authority at the end of the year, and that should not be a practice. That should be for things unforeseen, you know, just clean up your books for the year, that sort of thing. So in working with our chief's office, we are actually with our general maintenance money, we've put them on a quarterly diet. So they get the money quarterly and they work within that quarter, and then they go through another round of another quarter. And so we put some more detail here where they're adjusting and looking at their projects, knowing what's going on with them, water cost escalations, what's unplanned maintenance, what's causing these things, to really isolate that and address that during the fiscal year rather than at year end. And so those regional accountants are just doing a phenomenal job working with our business officers to really do reports, work with them, look at the numbers. And obviously our fiscal team is engaged as well for any funding adjustments that are needed. We're using a biweekly dashboard reporting system that ties to the highway maintenance spend plan, and coordinating with all the various folks and adapting to cost increases and supply chain issues that they are facing in their operations, reviewing those variances and making distributions that with impacts to their maintenance activities. And you will see a reduced reliance on CFO authority at year end. One thing I can't help but note is we would like to have a correction of our revenue, of over-realized revenue for the past 2 fiscal years. So you can see the details there. If we are granted that, we're going to use that budget authority to basically get us out of cash flowing on our maintenance activities on the highway fund side, and move to more of a world where cash flow is a good thing. It is a good tool. However, you need to be strategic. It needs to be based on, you know, business rules, not just kind of on autopilot. Let's just go ahead and cash flow. So there'll be continued increase, obviously, and some of our outsourcing and our maintenance areas that we would also need to include. We've got complete buy-in from our chief's office, obviously Secretary Boyette. Internal and external collaboration, kind of getting more in alignment with some of our spend plan performance and all of that. As our auditors are looking at where we were last year, we created more of a governance document overarching our spend plan, and we've given all that detail to the auditors. We have moved to more project-based forecasting. So when we historically did our forecasting with SAS. It was by kind of funding categories or types. So as we've moved forward, we've now gotten to a project level where we can see the actuals against a project and we can see what they forecasted. And so it gives us better confidence of what that forecast is telling us. So a lot of collaboration with our financial area, our division of highway, SAS, and again, Ernst & Young, to kind of help us along that path. Because again, we looked at our commitments. We know that the vast majority of what we spend at DOT are to external parties. And so when you see this particular graphic through the month of January, you see we're 77% again goes to our external parties. And of that, 64.5% are to construction contracts, followed by grants to other industry, and then professional engineering consulting contracts, followed by right-of-way, our POW bill, and just overall material purchases. So we've been doing a lot of work with our open commitments. And so you can see kind of a legend here on that first quadrant of our open commitments have increased since last fiscal year. Again, you can kind of see there in the that left-hand quadrant the differences. So very much on our radar of what those payouts are going to be over time. So you can see also as a result, expenditures through July to December have increased by 24% from last year. And our average annual spend has increased 1.5 billion will increase 1.4 billion for the next 4 years. So you can see 12 months, 13 to 24 months, 23 to 36, and then on up to 37.48. So we know our cash is going to be impacted due to these increases in expenditures. Cash balances will have also increased it here shortly, but when you look at the forecast, we know our burn rate will go from about 42 million in January to about 103 million when we think about January of 2023. So what have we done about this? Wanted to talk to you a little bit more about our forecast. And prior to January, SAS began forecasting project level payouts for construction and maintenance. And so that was the original forecast. And we asked them to put in a short-term forecast through the pandemic, because we knew our payout curves were not going to be in alignment with history, because it was just unprecedented. And so at that same time, we had them working on a longer term forecast where they were actually buying and putting in variables, industry variables specific to our country, specific to North Carolina analytics. And so that has been incorporated in their world. However, when we looked at both of these scenarios, we found there's some outliers, and it's around about 28 different projects. And so we've isolated those projects, and we've come up with what we're calling this hybrid forecast. It's been implemented. That's in the numbers you see today. So it's taken the combination of our short-term forecast and long-term for this hybrid. As I was talking about SAS, Ernst & Young, DOT engineers, and our financial folks in a room, in our boardroom, working all through this. This is the output that we've come up with. It leverages the best of both the short-term and the long-term. Payout projections for projects with significant variance between those projects are isolated, and we look at those particular payout curves. And I was shocked to find it's actually 28 projects. You would think with our portfolio of projects, those outliers would be more, but these particular projects actually have big impact. And so we've incorporated that to kind of give us the best information that we're going to babysit as we move forward. Just another slide that we typically show. I put it in here just for your information when you start looking at what our outstanding commitments and closing cash balances have been over the fiscal years. So it's more informational for you, but you can see here where we are in January of 2023. Again, construction, number one, followed by maintenance, and then our modal area, and then other would be like D&V type activities and such. One of the things that we were notified of here recently when we talked about our federal program that I felt I needed to share with you is going to become more and more public. Some of you may already know about it based on things you read. We were notified here within the last few weeks. We had a call with USDOT Federal Highway. There's a reconciliation issue that they notified us pre-IIJJ funding, the Infrastructure and Investment and Jobs Act. Some of their program codes are out of whack between their accounting system and their management system. So they brought it to light to all the states in a call a few Fridays ago. So the systems were Delphi county system, FMIS is the federal highway system. And so they basically just laid it out on the table. They've got this reconciliation issue specific to some program codes. We recently got some of those program codes. They've hired some more contractors to come in and reconcile these discrepancies. But it's a significant amount of money. It's 3.5 billion is the discrepancy. So that's serious. And they haven't just been able to give us a lot of information, the whys behind it. They said that they will come to us. So the impact to North Carolina of this pre-IIJA funding is at 75.7 million. So this is contract authority. This is funding. So comparative lower cut than other states. Typically when you, because of our August redistribution, because they're looking at all these old codes. Well, we built them. The train left the building. So they're looking at all these old codes from other states, and they're the ones they're trying to reconcile it to if by chance they have to write it off. So when you look at someone like Texas, their number is 591 million. Tennessee, 335.6 million. New Jersey, 276 million. Now, granted, we don't want to lose 75.7 million, but with our aggressive August redistribution, we just didn't have anything there for them to try and grab. So our pro rata share was like 1.67 compared to our normal funding distribution of what we get of the big pot is typically 4.3. They are looking to Congress for a resolution, but they're telling us, we're limited in being able to use any of the funds that there are in those old pots. Our allowance is 3.8 million, and we'll be using that if we need to close some projects or, if we don't want any money to lapse. North Carolina does not let money lapse. We figure a way out to use that money. So we have a meeting this Friday again with our local office. We're meeting with them every 2 weeks along with additional meetings because they're finding out more too. But I did want to let you know that this was something that's popped up here recently that was kind of a surprise. With 3.5 billion, you would think it would get Congress's attention. But anyway, just wanted to have that awareness about that. We included some more slides in our detail for you to look at, but that kind of concludes where I was going to kind of finish up today.
Thank you, Stephanie. The chair recognizes someone if you have any questions. It looks like Chairman Eiler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I maybe have done this way too long, but I've got several questions if the chair will permit. And thank you, Ms. King, for being here. I appreciate what you do. I did budgets for a couple of corporations in my long career. On slide number 6, your open commitments. What did you say it was included in open commitments? Excuse me.
If any of our liabilities on the books, any of those contracts, plus any other types of things that are purchase orders, anything like that. It's everything that we have in the system that would be considered a future payout.
Okay. Did you analyze, and this is done on a particular slide, did you analyze the highway use tax, where I know used cars have gotten extremely more valuable, and we only collect tax on the difference between the trade-in and the new car? Is that impacted much, or is it mostly the motor fuels tax? has been the biggest impact on the, on collections? Because I mean, that could have reduced the highway use tax.
Yeah, it could have. I don't know that I know the correct answer to that.
Okay,
But we will find it out. I'll talk with Bert Taseko and Amna Cameron that kind of look at that level of detail. But they probably do. But I have not noted anything myself. But that's the
Okay.
case.
Chairman Aller, you got a follow-up?
follow up?
Yeah.
I guess I've done way too many budget variances in my life, so. Slide number 10, and this is next to last here. It looks like it's a big dip around June of 24. And I'm wondering, is there a serious problem trying to, you said plateau maybe at 1.2 billion, trying to plateau the cash at a particular level, like 1.2 billion, instead of the big dips and accumulation of cash. We were big on the year on getting projects into the field, you know, not accumulating cash, and then it's been up and down. But
Yeah.
is there any problem with trying to make that plateau around 1.2 or?
We're going to be working hard on that. The areas in which you can try to do that is more on the highway fund side and also PE and right-of-way purchases.
Oh, okay.
So construction, not so much. And as y'all know, that have been around for a long time. On average, historically, a typical construction project's 4 years, but we're seeing it's lingered longer, obviously, with these payouts extending. You know, you can't really impact that, but we've got to impact those that we do have levers in which we can kind of cut back on.
Yeah, one last follow-up.
Yes, go ahead.
On number 11, you mentioned divesting some authority from the CFO in Raleigh. You suggesting the divisions should have more financial authority, particularly on the general maintenance reserve or GMR.
I wouldn't say more authority. I think ownership. I'm still the authority. But ownership and managing your projects during the year and ensuring you've got adequate funding on them. That's not something that you need to wait for CFO to do at the end of the year. That's part of the discipline that needs to be put in place, that when you're doing a project, you got to be mindful of the budget for it. And so that's what we've been working with our business officers. I talk at the operations staff meeting, business officers meeting, the regional accountants are out there with them to really micromanage at the project level to really understand what's going on with these projects. Because if you just spend and you're not looking at what are those causes, and you've got to provide that budget. So it's really an allotment process that's within our realm of financial management, but they have stepped up to the plate to take some ownership and responsibility.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. King.
Thank you, Chairman. Are there any other questions of Stephanie? Yes, Chairman Lazar.
Chair, thank you very, very much. My question is in regards to the projects themselves. Just following up, is there any oversight and recap process for projects in terms of whether they come in budget, where they're up or they're down per project? Kind of talking about what, maybe expanding a little more on that. Is there enough oversight, or do we need more oversight within those projects to really determine when we project too low or too high?
I think Marcel Vester and I think maybe you heard from him some last week. Lloyd Tharrington and their group, they look at them by project, and even our construction unit, they do. So that's a part of an increased discipline as well. And we're encouraging, and I've seen a great number of improvements in the funding of even our SIP projects and making sure they're funded throughout the year and not letting them go into, you know, expenditures greater than funding. But they isolate them and they look at them. And, you know, as you get construction supplemental agreements coming in, like once they're out there and they're digging in the earth, you know, and a needed adjustment is made to that, there's a lot of scrutiny to those as well. And what that delta amount is, and it comes up through our chief's office, through different approvals before, you know, that's even considered. So we're looking at cost, not just looking at, oh, we need more budget.
Representative Loftus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On slide number 10, I think it was, that had the massive drop starting in about March. Is that due to projects being now active and we're spending money?
Yeah, like our contract with surfacing program, they'll have their teams out there spreading asphalt as soon as that weather and the temperatures are. So that's normally kind of what we see, even in a kind of a pre-pandemic world. We spend a lot in the spring and summer, and then we kind of bring in some cash in those winter months, and then we're back out there again when the weather season permits to get stuff done, because those temperatures are so important. Yes, follow up, sir.
In the December where we had this gap below our statutory target, what creates that? How does that get below there before we put the brakes on and at least make it touch rather than dip below?
Yeah, and that's what we planned for that. That's why we forecast out. So when we can see that for this December, that we can rein it back in and get it looking better.
Has that,
Yeah, follow up.
has that happened previously? Every year we have that dip below?
You can typically see some cyclical things like with we pay out PAL bill, in December, make sure we get it in there in January. There's some other agency transfers we make, those types of things that can cause that. That's typically, kind of the causes.
Thank you. Thank you, madam.
Thank you. If you'll indulge me, the chair would like to follow up on that because I'm actually concerned about that as well. Because I'm looking at December 22. We don't see that dip. I don't see historical data back to 21 or 20. And I noticed that you were very focused on 23. So to follow up on Representative Loftus' question, why is it different this year? Because more people are going. Because last year, you had more of a baseline of cash because we weren't paying out as much on just overall expenditures. So as they're ramping up, and we're going to be paying out this summer because they're going to have more crews out there, more, you're going to see that decline just for our normal program. And then we're adding on these other things that we have to take that takes place. So you're going to see industry is going to be spending that money down. And it wasn't spending it in the previous years. A follow up real quick to that question. So you had mentioned in your presentation that you were going to do everything you could to make sure that that doesn't dip below the statutory level. Can you tell me what areas that you're going to withhold spending on to make sure that that doesn't dip below that statutory level? Stephanie, we haven't worked with our engineers yet. They're working on their spend plans are due to us in April. And so we're going to look and see what they have to say. But we have a meeting today to kind of, we meet routinely, and they're concerned about it as well. So there's an awareness of this, but this hybrid model that we just put in obviously is giving us some fresh data. So the areas in which, again, on the trust fund side of the house would be more PE right-of-way type purchases. And then on the highway fund side would be, reining back on some of their planned or, more so their planned maintenance activities. Thank you. Yes, Senator McGinnis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stephanie, over on slide 11, down at the bottom, we've got a couple of words that always concern me. The word in error and the other phrase not corrected, and the word in error again. But I'm also concerned is there a misspelling there on the word again, or is that against? Is that a misspell right next to the 107 million? The word again, in error again. Is that correctly applied?
I think what it was referring to, obviously, what happened in FY21, it happened again in FY22.
Okay.
It probably isn't written as well as it should be.
Okay, but when I see the word directed to loan payment in error for 107 million, over collection not corrected 176 million. What does that mean?
When we come up at the end of the fiscal year, obviously you're going to have over realized revenue based on your forecast, or you're going to have under realized revenue. It's not a perfect world.
Right.
We pray for over realized revenue.
Right.
So
the thing that's throwing me off the phrase in error and not corrected. That's the red flag for me, if you will.
Yeah, and we've put in for corrective action for this. When we paid back from the highway fund to the trust fund, is basically moving cash. It was a cash transaction, the green money moving. When that money was spent in the highway fund, we already covered it with budget.
Right.
And so when this over realized revenue happened, there was no entry for budget authority.
Yeah.
So our books are out of whack.
Okay, but follow up.
Yes, follow up.
So are you going to need something in the highway and the DOT omnibus bill to give you something
Budget
for
authority.
this, a budget authority on this?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
It's
And
something-
have we been apprised of this, or is?
Yes, I know
So-
Secretary Boyette, it's one of his top priorities.
And Madam Chair, I got a couple more.
Okay, great. And then we will follow up because we need to leave some time for Nick Clerkin's presentation. So these will be our last questions. Yes, sir.
You're showing 2.39 cash return, 2.39% interest cash return. Now, the federal window right now is paying 4.65. So I understand that runs behind. We're meeting also with the treasurer's office. When it runs behind, does it stay longer when the rate changes? Or is it an immediate, when the rate goes down, is it immediate down?
It feels like it.
Okay, all right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm a little premature because we're meeting with the treasurer's office. So let me jump one more and I'll get out of
Yes,
the way. Ernst & Young and SAS are great companies. We've got a great relationship with them. Are we getting what we need out of them? Or can they do more? Do we need to use them more, use them less? Are you satisfied? And I'm not here casting in dispersion on anybody. I just want to know if we're getting all we need. Do we need more? Because we have a contractual relationship with them as well.
Yes, I think, if you asked me, and I would think maybe Secretary Boyette as well, we're pleased
Okay.
at this point. And at the point we're not pleased, we push.
Okay.
We're very aggressive and we push.
Good deal. Okay.
Because we don't have time to not be.
Okay. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Financial Officer Stephanie King, for presenting to us. Thank you so much. Up next, Nick Clerkin, Fiscal Research Division, to give us our consensus forecast for transportation. Again, we're going to hold all questions till the end. Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Nick Clerkin here from the Fiscal Research Division. Y'all heard me in the full Appropriations Committee yesterday discussing the consensus forecast for transportation. But for this committee, I wanted to go a little bit more in depth and give you some more detail and background on this. Just as a reminder, the consensus forecast is worked out between the office of between OSBM and the Fiscal Research Division. And we come to a consensus on what the revenues will be for the highway fund, the highway trust fund, as well as yesterday you heard about the general fund. But I'm responsible for this piece of it on our side here at Fiscal Research. So this is just the general overview that you saw yesterday with three kind of main points there. You've got the highway, you've got the different categories of revenue there between the highway fund and the highway trust fund, and then the total transportation revenue. You'll see for the current fiscal year, that's been revised upward by just about $17 million on a 4.8 or just under $4.8 million base. So that's essentially right on target at the high level. We'll go into more of the details on the next slide, but that's within 0.5% of what was put into the certified budget last year for this current fiscal year. Looking forward to 23-24. You'll see year-over-year growth of about $368 million there, or just under 8% growth. The main driver in that year is going to be that transfer of the sales tax revenue going up from 2 to 4% going to transportation, but there's some other factors as well. And that leads to a total of just under $5.2 billion between the funds. Then when you look up to 24, 25, there's an additional transfer of from 4 to 6% of that sales tax revenue. There's also a large statutorily required increase in DMV fees forecasted. So I'll discuss that a little bit more as well. And that leads to about a 9% year-over-year increase. So that gets us up to about 5.6 billion within the transportation funds. On this slide, and I'll see if I can zoom in a little bit. So let me do that. Just back out here and zoom in a little bit. So this is the detail, and y'all wouldn't have seen this yesterday, but this is what I wanted to show the committee today. So this is the detail that shows the different accounting between the highway fund and the highway trust fund of each of these different revenue sources, and goes line by line through. And the way you kind of read it is over on the left, you have the category of the tax that or fee. Then you have the actuals from last fiscal year, 21-22, to kind of give a baseline. You have what was in the certified budget from last year's April forecast. And then you have the revised forecast. You can see how that's changed for the current fiscal year. You also have each year of the upcoming biennium in there as well. So just to kind of I'll go through kind of each of these areas at a high level on the slides as well. But looking at motor fuels tax, you'll see coming in a little bit underneath what was forecasted in the current fiscal year. Some other smaller fees in that category: gasoline inspection, highway usage registration. Jet fuel sales, we know that one because that's already been transferred over, so that came in a little over. Highway use tax lease, that's also known as a short-term lease. Those are those funds from rental cars and U-Hauls, and those, to give one example, those have been coming in quite a bit over what was in the certified budget. So you see a bit of a jump there. And then the total, essentially kind of some things balancing out there, but coming in just a little bit under by about 19 million there in the motor fuels taxes. Going down, licenses and fees, these are in the DMV area. You'll see that these have been revised upward by about 10 million when you add them all up together. You'll also see that during the second year of the biennium there, and I'll just scroll up a little bit here so you can see the headers. For the second year of the biennium, there's a big jump there due to the changes in the stagger registration fees that will be adjusted upwards, driver license, truck license, as well as the other licenses and fees. The international registration plan, that's for interstate truckers, that's not going to be impacted by the fee rate increases. So that just grows just naturally with more business and traffic expected. You also see down here the sales tax. That number was increased a little, slightly over the what was initially projected last year. Investment income, and I know Senator McGinnis in particular, you've asked a question about this at our last committee. You'll see that this has been revised upward in a big way for the current fiscal year from 1.5 million, which was just kind of a de minimis amount that was in the forecast prior, to 30.4 million in the highway fund. And that is expected to stay quite elevated over what it's been in recent years. Going down to the highway trust fund, you'll see the other part of the motor fuels collections that come in. Again, those have been a little bit under what was projected. Highway use tax for the sale and long-term lease of vehicles is essentially right on target for the current fiscal year. Going down to the various title fees, those have come in under the certified budget, but are expected to grow. And you see that again in the second year; those grow significantly as the rate adjustment goes into place for inflation. You see the sales tax that was not transferred to the highway. That was only transferred to the highway fund for the current fiscal year, but 3%. And then 4.5% to the trust fund in each year of the biennium, respectively. And the investment income there expected to rise as well as the that it's not as high as what's in the highway fund because the cash balance is typically has been lower in the highway trust fund, but that's the interest earned on those balances, and that gives you kind of a broad overview. I think that table really sums it up, and this is, of course, as with all presentations on our committee website for your reference. So going back to my presentation here, I just at a real high level, you saw this yesterday, but just to kind of account for the changes in the revenue sources for the Department of Transportation, it used to be more than half of these funds coming from motor fuels taxes. This is from last actuals from the prior fiscal year, with just under a quarter each from the registration and license fees, as well as the highway use tax. But as you can see in the second year of the biennium, when the full impact of that sales tax comes into play, that's a major fourth factor in the revenue sources for the Department of Transportation. I wanted to just go through kind of in order of the size here of the different areas overall to their impacted transportation. But the motor fuels tax rate was at 38.5 cents in the 2022 calendar year, and this is calculated via a formula that's set in statute based on population growth as well as the CPI for energy. That's an inflationary adjustment made for energy prices and kind of accounting for the energy prices. So as everyone can recall, energy prices spiked in a major way from 2021 to 2022, and that led to about a 2-cent increase, exactly a 2-cent increase in the motor fuels tax rate. That in the certified budget in the forecast that was done in April, that was at 40.2 cents. So that helped increase collections a little bit overall for motor fuels in the current fiscal year. As looking forward, this is projected to remain as close to flat as energy prices are expected to decline, and then kind of level off, and population growth takes back over as the main factor, pushing that up by 1/10 of a cent in the 2025 year. Just kind of looking at the underlying factors of the forecast, we basically, and I probably should have said this before the last slide, but we have two things that we look at essentially, which one is the rate that we expect to charge, and then also the total number of gallons underlying that are consumed. So you can see that the revised forecast has a dip from the prior year in total gallons consumed. I would attribute that to the really sky high prices that we were seeing for gas over the summer. Those are really where we were most off of target by my estimates. So, but it looks like now that prices have moderated significantly, that we're closer to back on target for the gallons. And that's projected to rise slowly in the coming fiscal years, the total number of gallons. As we know, the fleet overall is getting more efficient for vehicles. So there's about roughly 50 million gallons in increases expected in each fiscal year. Going to how that shakes out in motor fuels revenue. As you can see, because the gallons were lower, but the rate was higher than what was expected, those kind of offset for the current fiscal year. So coming in a little bit under, just about 55 million under what was in the certified budget this year for motor fuels is what the revised forecast is showing us. And then that number increases because as I said, the rate is done on a calendar year basis. So for this current fiscal year, part of it was 38.5 cents for the first year of the biennium, going up to about 40.5 and 40.4. So that increases collections. And then that kind of levels off as the rate stays the same in the second year of the biennium. Looking at the highway use tax, that's essentially close to right on target for this current fiscal year. I mean, within 5 million, we would typically call that right on target for that one. So in the upcoming years of the biennium, we are expecting the forecast that we look at expect auto prices, which have been really high, to fall, but the quantity of cars that people purchase to go up as some of the supply chain issues are eased. That's an area where there's slight growth projected in the first year of the biennium, and then a little more in the second year as those issues are expected to get resolved, especially by 24 to 25. DMV fees, that's close to target for the current year as well. You can see that those typically rise pretty slowly over time. But because of this rate adjustment that we're anticipating in 24, 25, expecting it's basically going to account for all the inflation that occurred between 2019 and 2023. And as y'all know, that's a significant figure. So that's projected right now to be about a 19.1% increase in DMV fees, other than those international registration plan that I mentioned before, and a few other smaller miscellaneous fees. But almost all driver license and registration fees, and then all truck and title fees. So that's going to lead to about 187 million increase in the second year of the biennium there for fees writ large. Wanted to give you some examples of some of the fees that will be increased based on the current projection. So this is just something that I put together. This wasn't part of the consensus forecast process. This is just something that I put together just kind of for your knowledge. So you see driver license, the annual fee for that increasing by about $1 there. Your typical registration for a private vehicle increasing by about $7.50 there. The commercial driver's license application increasing by about $8 there. $16 for title application, or $10 for title application fees, and then about $27 increase in the electric vehicle fee that is charged currently for electric vehicles. And then in your on your committee website, it's got a full detail of all the various fees as best I can estimate at this time of what the various fees, if you're interested in other aspects of that. Wanted to address electric vehicles specifically today. I received a few questions in the committee about this particular topic. So I just wanted to kind of give you the figures related to this. Electric vehicles today are about 1 of every 225 registered vehicles in the state. So you'll see on the chart on the left there, and this is a report that is put out monthly on NCDOT's website about how many registered vehicles there are for electrics, and then the total number of vehicles next to it as well. So you can see today we've got about 38,000 electric vehicles on the road of a total registered vehicles of 8.5 million. And so yeah, 0.4% are electric vehicles today. Now, the growth rate in electric vehicles has been significant, as you see, going from 7,000 a few years ago to 38,000 today. That's about a 41% annual increase. And as we know, if that growth were to continue to compound, that would increase significantly over time. When we look at the annual registration that EVs pay, $140.25 today, as you saw in the last slide, projected to rise to $167. The average driver, this is from the NC First Commission from 2021, generates about $200 in motor fuels taxes per year. So there is a differential there of about $60 today, and depending on how you did the estimate, about 33 in the coming years between what EVs pay and what your gas driver pays. But in the current year, this amount of revenue is just $5.4 million that these EVs would be generating based on those figures from December, and that's about $2 million less than what the average driver would produce. And I just wanted to kind of put that into context and perspective onto what the values of those figures were. Now, if you look forward, to 2030, and you use that 41% growth rate, we'd be looking at about 5% of vehicles that would be on the road that would be EVs in 2030, and that would be about 420,000. If you kept a differential of about $33 between there, that would be missing out on about $14 million in revenue at that time in 2030. So, I mean, I haven't, again, this is not part of what we put into the forecast, but just based on those figures, I wanted to give you some background on what's been going on with EVs. To mention it again, the sales tax transfer, you'll see that amount was zero prior to the 2022 Appropriations Act, rising to 2%, 208 million. That's a little above what was in the certified budget, additional 15 million there above certified, and then rising to 4% and then 6% in the coming years. And that's driving over half of the growth that you see in the transportation funds overall over the biennium. Just to mention the short-term lease, also called the highway use tax lease, on our document, just for your reference, those figures have been coming in significantly over what was in the certified budget. This is, we think, mostly due to really strong demand for travel, and that is expected to increase modestly over the coming years as well, based on the forecast that we're looking at in the models we put together. Investment income, just to stress it again, that's been really small in prior years at just $5 million in the last fiscal year. And that's been revised by about a large 1,700% is the figure, going from 3 in the certified budget to 52 in the revised forecast for this year. That rises a little bit in the second year as interest rates continue to rise, and then declines a little bit as DOT cash balances. It's a function of cash balances as well as the investment income. So if those balances decline somewhat, those will also that will decrease the amount of investment income that will come in. Wanted to note jet fuel sales. So the aviation fuels tax applied to those. It's a 7% rate on aviation fuels. Those fuel prices have gone up quite a bit, which has led to the certified, or going above the certified revenue there. That's expected to increase. Travel, again, projected to remain strong, and that's a big factor in that model as well. That's expected to increase a little bit by about 2 million in the first year of the biennium. Then in the second year, that accounts for a tax credit that commercial aviation businesses currently receive, and that is expiring in 2024. So that revenue is expected to increase because of the expiration of that tax credit. To kind of just sum it all up, in the first year of the biennium, you're seeing 368 million over the current year. More than half of that's coming from the sales tax, and then a small amount from DMV fees, and then the motor fuels tax, highway use tax, and all the other factors, about 37%. In the second year of the biennium, the major drivers of the sales tax at just under 50%, as well as about 40% coming from that inflationary adjustment made to DMV fees, and just 15% of that, about 70 million, coming from the rest of all the factors within transportation. So those are the main drivers, and that concludes my presentation for today, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the presentation. Yes, Chairman Eiler, then Chairman McGinnis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excellent presentation yesterday and today. Thank you, Nick. Just a couple of things real quick. A comment, really, that 2-cent jump on slide 5 in the motor fuels tax rate. Years ago, the tax rate was not based on CPI. It was based on the global wholesale price of a barrel of oil. It would have been a lot bigger jump, I believe, than that 2 cents had we not plateaued that. I was in a Brawley when he was here, and some of us had that policy change. So just to comment on that, it wasn't as dramatic as it could have been. Are we getting, and I don't want to excite anybody online or anything here, but, and I don't like new taxes. But, is any income from either our funds or the general fund from the ride sharing like Uber or anything like that? Or is that just the general fees like motor fuels and all?
Representative Myler, those funds are not deposited not deposited into the transportation funds at this time.
Follow up,
Yes.
is there any additional taxes on taxis or Ubers or anything to the
Yes.
general fund?
I'm sorry, can you clarify, you said in the general fund or
Yeah,
in
is
the?
any additional tax as far as a service tax or anything, not just the motor fuels from the Ubers or the taxi industry or anything, anybody, any ride sharing? Is any additional tax as far as the service side of it?
We'll have to get that information from our team that covers the general fund side of things. I'm not aware of what that amount would be.
Okay, just to follow up, I'm not advocating for a new tax. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Aller. Chairman McGinnis.
Nick, I was listening to the radio the other day, something I do upon occasion. And there was an announcement made that North Carolina had just crossed the threshold with 50,000 EVs. Your presentation says 38,000. I must assume that you were not counting the EVs that are not plug-in. You were not counting the hybrids, or kind of where are you on that? I just want to clarify that, make sure what I heard the other day was on the beam. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Nick.
Senator McGinnis, that is correct. The plug-in hybrids are not accounted for in that 38,000 figure. There are about 15,000 of those vehicles on the roads today. So that would give it the 50,000 number that was cited in the radio.
Thank you, Nick. Representative Adams.
Yes, following up on that. So we have EVs, which are pure electric vehicles, and we have plug-in hybrids, and we have hybrids, correct?
Yes.
Yes, Nick.
Okay, follow up. How are they allocated, or are they accounted for separately?
Yes, Nick.
So, Representative Adams, they are the only vehicles that pay the additional rate are the full electric vehicles. Now, the hybrid and plug-in electrics would just pay your normal registration fees as well as any motor fuels tax that they consumed. The department does track the figures for those, and I think the number of hybrids today was about 160,000 on the road today as part of that total. So that's not the plugins; that's the conventional hybrids.
Follow up.
Follow up. Yes, overall, just looking at all of the budget projections, what I think I'm seeing is we're not looking at considering a recession at all. We're looking at growth. Is that correct?
Representative Adams, so the term that we used in the consensus forecast was a slow session. So that was essentially a slowdown in economic growth, but not quite dipping to a recession. I think what you see in this forecast is that most of this is statutory changes. So increasing those DMV fee rates, as well as moving those sales tax funds over from the general fund.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions from committee members? Yes. Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Rude
Yes,
out.
no,
Thank you.
Sorry, forgive me.
No problem. Just curious if we have any numbers on the amount of people on the road and kind of average miles driven by a person in a year to try to put some of these numbers in context.
Representative Ruda, those figures are available. I do not have them at this time, but I can prepare something and send it to you for follow up with how many drivers and with how many miles the typical driver travels. So I know that the Federal Highway Administration does a analysis of that I could take a look at.
Thank you. That'd be great.
Thank you, Representative. All right, Nick, it looks like you're off the hook. Thank you
very
so much for presenting today. And that concludes our committee meeting of the Joint Transportation Appropriations meeting. Thank you.